The Cheshire Career Center, located at Keene High School, in partnership with the Cheshire Historical Society, is pleased to present the Local History Project.
All right, can you tell us about your childhood, and did any of your childhood experiences affect your future?
Well, I'm one of 8 children, so I lived in a large group. So I learned from that experience that you don't go it alone. You're part of something larger than yourself.
You grew up in
Oyster Bay, New York.
Yeah.
That's right.
How did the culture there shape who you are, and what was that like growing up in New York?
In that particular part of New York, it was a privileged community. And I mean, it's fair to say I came from a pretty privileged background. Mostly lots of green around, large houses, sailing, and we all went away to boarding school. So that was part of the way I was raised. In fact, first school I went to when I did go to at the high school level wasn't even in the United States. It was in Switzerland. So I had an experience of growing up that indeed was privileged and exposed me to quite a few people, quite a few experiences, and I accept that and I'm fortunate for that.
What was your high school experience like, and how did that influence your decisions for your career and future?
It's the first time that I actually became truly interested in journalism. Without much planning, I became editor of the school newspaper and began to taste that experience, and I rather liked it.
How did you end up at Harvard, and while you were there, what did you study, and what was your experience at Harvard like?
My father had studied there, and perhaps that was a factor in my being accepted. I did okay at school, so I got in, and I initially thought I'd major in engineering, and then I changed that to English. I changed that to something else, and it was only in my junior year that I began to really click academically and intellectually. And I went to at the college there were not just courses, there are coffees and teas and discussion groups you can go to, and I just happened into a discussion group on a Sunday afternoon in one of the dorms by an author who'd spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia. And somehow I began to hear about to start to think about other parts of the world in ways that I hadn't before.
You said that you visited India during college?
That's right. After my junior year, he was the country I was studying, and now I'd like to go see it. And I was fortunate in that there was some money that enabled me to do that. And so I traveled with a friend in some other parts of the world getting there, for example, Afghanistan and Pakistan. But we traveled around quite a bit in India and then came home. And there I began my interest in the country came to full blossom.
What did you major in at Harvard? What was your final major?
It was general studies, actually, because there wasn't a specific major because I bounced around to so many majors. But the general specific focus of my intellectual pursuit was modern South Asia from about 1750 on. In any case, I did serve as a Peace Corps volunteer in southern India. A very remote village, no electricity, no English, no plumbing. And my job was to survey irrigation canals. And so here I was 22 years old, fresh from college, and I was introducing new methods of agriculture to people who have been doing agriculture for centuries. And but I was asking them to do new things, such as allow water from one canal to pass through one person's land to get to another person's land. And that required a certain amount of confidence. I had some confidence, but when you're actually asking people to change the way they do agriculture, and you've never really done much of it yourself, you've just been instructed in it, or to ask people to spend quite a bit of money to build a canal or a dam. Once you do that and it turns out right, and fortunately all the steps I took turned out well, it builds confidence in you. Doesn't make you overconfident, I hope, but it gives you confidence that you can move forward and do yet another project like that again.
That confidence you talk about, how did that translate into other things you did in the future?
Well, say, being a journalist in Washington, D.C. and talking with pretty senior people, like presidents and the like. So, you have to have a certain amount of confidence to ask the question. You have to have the confidence to ask the stupid question. Sometimes the stupid question is the best question. And you can't ask that question, or you can't approach people unless you have a measure of confidence in doing what you're doing. When I returned from the Peace Corps, I wanted to go to a large newspaper, but I thought I'd start at a small paper to begin with, develop some skills. So I came to the Keene Sentinel. It was a small, well-regarded newspaper in New England. My plan was to stay here 2 years, then go to a big paper that had a New Delhi bureau in India. And so I did. I came here for 2 years, and then good experience, good learning experience, and then applied to the Baltimore Sun, and I was there for 10 years. And there I learned, entered a new field, which was economics. And so I wound up covering economics in Washington during the 1970s and beginning of the 1980s.
How did you end up in Keene with the Sentinel?
So I'd gone to the Sun, Baltimore Sun, because I had foreign bureaus. And so at a certain time, early 1980s, the opportunity came to occupy one of those bureaus, to go to New Delhi. But some personal things had happened during the interim. And one of them, significant one, being that I had married one of the daughters of the owners of the Keene Sentinel. And so the publisher and owner of the paper, who was my father, who became my father-in-law, he said, well, I like the idea of your journalism, of your traveling around the world, being in foreign bureaus for 10 or 15 years, but I'm getting on, and somebody's got to run this newspaper. And so, choice for you. Either you come up here and you help me run the newspaper, or you go abroad and do your traveling, and the newspaper will find a new home. And so I discussed that with my wife, and by now I had 3 daughters. So I wasn't quite the freewheeling foreign correspondent that I pictured earlier. And having seen and covered business and economics, I began to take an interest in maybe running an enterprise. And so the combination of the opportunity to run an enterprise in a region that I happened to like, because I'd lived here 2 years earlier, and the prospect of having a little more control over my life than I would have had if I were a foreign correspondent, and then led us, our family, to decide to move here. So we did move here, and the job was excellent. The marriage did not last. So it's a somewhat unusual situation here, but I wound up being the former son. I was running the newspaper for my former father-in-law. We had a good bond together. And so that is how I got here, was by being asked by the publisher, do you want this work? 3 years into retirement, when people talk to me, when they say, oh, how's retirement? As if they think it must be awfully dreadfully lonely and boring and all I'm doing is sitting around on a rocking chair. I mean, that's some people's concept of retirement. I'm as overcommitted now as I was when I was at the newspaper. And I think people should change their thinking about that particular topic and say, retirement, that just means you're leaving one thing and now you can move on to 6 others.